GFS. NGPI would be the no gaps, is the purple line through here. No gaps is the Navy global model system, and the EGRI would be the European model. Again, these are all global models. The AEMI here is the GFS run 12 times, and that's the app. Tropical storm, HWRF, also the same thing, a high resolution hurricane model. Now the CMCI, this model here is the Canadian model. It's a Canadian global model, similar to what the US global model and the European global model are in that respect then. Now what we do is, after we've looked at all these, we then narrow this down to what we call one complete consensus model, and that's what this is. TVCC basically combines all these relevant models into one computer model and averages them out. And this is your track forecast. And this is usually what the Hurricane Center does, is they will generally let the computers do their own crunching, and then they come up with this complete computer model here. The numbers here represent the time steps. So this was the computer model run at 18Z, which is 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And so the 24 then will be 2 p.m. tomorrow, 48 would be 2 p.m. on Friday, and so forth through there. So you can see by 144 hours, which would be Monday, 18Z, or 2 p.m. Monday, has the storm roughly, looks like about 300 miles south-southwest of Bermuda. But there's the track forecast that all the different computer models are looking at.
Hey, Dan, real quick, I got a question, because I saw the latest runs that you were showing there. And I was just showing some stuff that still had several models in the Caribbean. Are the 18Z, or, I mean, and it looked to me like what you just showed me, none of them are going into the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's correct. Let's see here. Yeah, these are all the computer models. Now, what you could have been looking at is you could have been looking at the some of the members of the AVN, not the AVNI, but the consensus, I mean the global model from the GFS, and they run it 12 times, you'll get all these different solutions. And that's probably what you're looking at, because these solutions, what happens, they take the GFS global model and they perturb the field. So they change the temperature, the pressure, the humidity in the model different ways, and then that comes up with 12 different computer forecast simulations of the same thing. So that's probably what you were looking at. Some of those model runs of those 12 different runs probably were showing that. So, this is basically all of these are basically individual computer forecast models by themselves.
Dan, could you explain quickly a little bit about, we talk a lot about models, and you actually had a chance to go down and talk to some folks over at the National Hurricane Center recently, and I actually talked to some of the modelers as well. Could you explain a little bit about the fact that, you know, what they actually are, you know, without going too high end, and also how they're tweaking it at all times, and how they're going from a 3D to a 4D type of mentality?
Right. Well, when the computer models were first designed, they were two-dimensional. Basically, if you know your math, basically you just have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, and that's your point right through there. About 20 years ago, we then developed a three-dimensional computer model, and what that does is basically give you not only your horizontal and vertical, but also gives you a combination, which gives you a three-dimensional type structure in the data. So if you were to look at, let's say, for example, a cube, and you took that cube, that's what you'll be looking at for a data point. Now we have a fourth dimension, which is actually time, and then this is called 4D VAR. And what they mean by the different resolutions, or what they mean by this in a 4D VAR versus a 3D VAR, is in a 3D VAR it's three-dimensional, 4D VAR it's four-dimensional, but it's basically that fourth dimension is time. So you're calculating time in the way the way the actual structure of each variable is changing throughout time. Now this sounds very probably sounds very scientific and very high tech.
It's high-end stuff. Yeah, it certainly is. And in fact, you were telling me that you know, a lot of times they'll experiment with it. They'll tweak the numbers a little bit and try to see how, because it's still a learning process. I mean, there's no perfect model. And that's the question I get from so many people. You know, what is the best model? You know, which one handles things differently? And, you know, and in terms of, there is no perfect model. It's just something that we're trying to master. But the Euro certainly has and the GFS seem to be the ones at the Hurricane Center, they're the biggest fans of. Would you not agree?
That's correct. And the reason for that is because the GFS, the physics in the GFS was changed 2 years ago and actually refined last year so that it would be able to, it has a higher resolution now, not only in the horizontal, but also in the vertical. So when you're looking at this model, it does have more information. Now, there are some very high resolution models out there. The problem is putting those on a global scale. European is by far probably the most sophisticated of all the global computer models, simply because the physics in the European does a much better job with dealing with terrain, with dealing with the land versus the ocean type situation. And so that's the reason why that model does such a good job. Another thing that has changed in the European and to some degree the GFS is we're now including satellite drift winds into this. So no longer are we relying on just these balloon soundings. You know, over the entire Earth, balloons are set up twice a day, and we get a vertical structure of the atmosphere. But those sites that set up the balloons are few and far between. So we don't have any balloons going up over the oceans unless there's a ship having to launch one because of a scientific venture going on out through there. So what we're doing now is we're using computers to look at satellite clouds, the clouds, how the clouds are moving on a satellite. We determine which is a high-level cloud, a mid-level cloud, and a low-level cloud, and those winds really help us out tremendously. Another thing we're also doing is these polar orbiters, which orbit the Earth north-south. Those are on a lower orbit. They also sense the moisture content of the atmosphere. The image I showed you here, this microwave, this basically is looking at the actual moisture from the model, but it's looking at a certain part of the moisture within the actual satellite image, and the computer is lifting it out. New satellites, which will be launched sometime in about 3 or 4 years from now, if the government funds it, that's another story right there. Then we will have more vertical resolution because the satellites that will be launched in a few years will enable us to see more information then. But not only that, but be able to see information more often. These polar orbiters just do not give us enough information because there's only about 2 or 3 of them that actually are consistently giving us information. And some of these satellites are orbiting the Earth are actually defense satellites. So I know people said, well, the Defense Department is launching these spy satellites. Well, what they're doing now is they're using some of those spy satellites to also help us understand the weather over these tropical systems as well.
Dan, in terms of the Caribbean and history, because you know we talk about this every day pretty much. The GFS day 10 through 14 tries to spin something up, and whether it's hitting Tampa, whether it's in the Panhandle, whether it goes across the Yucatan, you know, you never know. And Dan is very much a proponent. He goes 0 to 10 days, and after 10 days, I think you call it fantasy land, right?
Exactly, exactly. You get to the point where the computer loses reality. Not on every storm system, but what you look for is you look for consistency. So if you see a storm 10 days out, and then the next run of the computer, it shows it, 9.5 days out. Next run shows it 9 days out, 8 days out, it still shows it. Then you've got consistency through time. But that's not what's happening here. As Dennis has pointed out, 10, 14 days out, you see the same thing happening. It's showing some kind of storm system. Now, that being said, it's interesting to note that the European models run that came out late this afternoon does show a storm developing in the Western Caribbean. I didn't have a chance didn't have time to bring up a good slide of this, but it's certainly showing the area of low pressure developing in the Western Caribbean. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people would like to see some rain get up into Florida, not necessarily a damaging type system, but certainly a lot more rain. We've had rain in the Tampa area, but areas north of us, especially of the southeast U.S., they are still in a almost in a full drought situation. So we can certainly use a tropical system to come up and bring some rainfall in those areas. But it looks like the storm that develops, according to the European, goes north up to about the Yucatan Channel there, and then goes west.
Mm-hmm.
The problem we faced this year so far is we've had very strong westerly winds over the northern portion of the United States that have occasionally extended down into the southern part of the United States. And westerly winds, you're not going to get a storm that comes up into the southeast U.S. that way. You need those winds to slack it off and stay well to the north for a storm to come up into our area. Unfortunately, those westerly winds are still going to haunt us. And if you don't want to see tropical weather, tropical storms or hurricanes coming to Florida, and you want to vote for these westerlies to keep sinking down in over Florida then.
We were talking to, and it's kind of an irony because last night we were talking to Tony Raines from the National Weather Service in Ruskin, and we were talking about how even though I've been in this area 17 years, and rarely do we have a tropical storm or a hurricane from the western Gulf go cutting straight across. Even though it looks like it should be a beeline just from point A to point B, it just doesn't usually work that way. And just as I said that, I was looking at the GFS today, and that's exactly what it did. Day 10 or 11, it took a tropical low in the western Gulf and brought it over into Florida down the road. Again, it's past the line you talk of in the fantasy world, but I think the thing that we're trying to relay to the folks here is simply this is the time of the year that the Caribbean, things will more than likely develop, and it all boils down to, you can make it as simple or as scientific as you want to, but 99% of the time, it's going to boil down to whether a trough is going to be digging in and lifting that thing right up toward Florida.
That's exactly right. Again, that's what the saying is that you need those westerly winds to get down over Texas to help guide whatever develops out through there. So the problem is that we're just exactly what you stated right there. You need everything to fall into place in a perfect type of situation. And that kind of situation just does not happen. That's the number one reason why we just don't see, in a given year, there are 60 to 70 tropical waves that march from the African coast all the way into Central America. And we only see somewhere between 10 and 15 that actually develop into organized tropical systems.
Wow.
And again, that same mentality, you get a storm to develop perfectly in the western Gulf and head due eastward is really, really almost impossible to happen. But again, if everything falls into place, you can certainly have something close to that. Usually what happens is we'll get a storm develop in the Caribbean, come up through the Yucatan Peninsula, and then curve, and move eastward, toward the Florida coast. So we've seen several of those, that have done that in times past. But a full-fledged Category 3 or 4 hurricane, you're probably not going to see that happen, because by the time they go over the Yucatan and start turning the whole atmosphere, which allowed them to become a real powerful storm, is just not there anymore. It's almost like you have a bushel basket of corn in front of a horse or in front of an animal, and if you take that away, the animal's not going to perform nearly as much as if you had that food right in front of them.
Hey, Dan, we got a comment or a question from Randy. He's in Ohio, and he's asking about the fact that the modeling of late has been showing just a huge low up in Canada, like a 980 millibar low. So much so that it actually was taking a tropical system. Again, this is the GFS, but it was a 982 low in Canada that was impacting a tropical storm just off the coast of South America and causing it to turn pretty much due north. It was literally that big of an impact. In terms of the modeling in September and October and a 980 millibar low, where do those come from? Is that something that might originate from, typhoons? We've been hearing about typhoons over in Japan, or is it something entirely different dropping in from, say, the Gulf of Alaska up north and cutting across? Or is that something that's all that unusual for September?
Well, again, it'd be almost impossible for a storm in the northern latitudes to have an impact in South America. The problem is your wind flow between the two hemispheres, South and North Hemisphere. You have a belt of very strong winds in the we normally call the ITCZ across through there, and it's impossible for any weather to go from one hemisphere to the next. Basically, you'll have moisture going through there, but it can be impossible. My guess is that there are some relationships that do happen. For example, if you get a big storm somewhere in one hemisphere or one part of the hemisphere, you'll have a compensating storm developing elsewhere. This does happen on occasion. For example, a good example of this is sometimes we'll see a big storm, let's say in the Indian Ocean, east of Africa. And what will happen is that storm creates such a distortion, or I won't say distortion, but certainly a large perturbation in the whole atmosphere, that perturbation then shows up elsewhere across the globe as well. We're just now beginning to understand those relationships, how something halfway across the world can certainly have an impact, on the other side of the world. But as far as a direct relationship between a storm in the northern latitudes and like the southern in South America, it's very impossible. You can see relationships, though. Sometimes you'll see a storm here, like over the northern hemisphere, and see another storm like down through there. But it's unlikely that either storm is affecting each other directly.
A couple of things. One, Dan, Randy, one of our viewers in Ohio, just won $500 on his Pick 4 ticket. He just posted that, so congratulations to Randy. How about that? And yeah. And secondly, this is the question that we hear all the time, and this is because truthfully, Dan, with all this stuff going on, ultimately people want to know, okay, is it going to affect us? So the general question is, so Dan, this is from Steve, who's a Steelers fan, based on the fact that his avatar is a Pittsburgh Steelers avatar. So Dan, in your opinion, in the next 10 to 14 days, do you think we will see any kind of tropical systems near the Tampa Bay area? I know that's broad brush, but you know what?
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's a tough call. I'd say more realistically, at least a better information I have suggests we will not be bothered by any tropical system for the rest of this month, as far as directly. Mm-hmm. Now, October, a different story, as we said. I would say that at least there's some chance, at least maybe a 20% chance that Florida could be affected by some kind of tropical system, either coming from the Caribbean or coming from the developing somewhere in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. It's the reason why I say that is because of what we've seen in times past. We've gone from a neutral situation to going back into a back-to-back La Nina pattern. We have seen development, late-season development in the Western Caribbean, and there's a chance that could come toward Florida. So I'd say right now nothing for about the next week or so, at least the next 8-9 days. Okay. But certainly, once we get beyond that, there's some chance that we might have to deal with something coming out of the Caribbean.
All right, and lastly, since you've actually looked at the forecast, take us through the weekend. I did my stuff from 5 to 6:30, but what's your take on people trying to make weekend plans for our area?
Well, it looks like, again, we've got thunderstorms, boiling up over parts of the area right now. And again, if you have if you've got some outdoor plans and you want dry weather, this may not be your weekend, because it does look like we will be threatened by thunderstorms. I'd say there's a better chance of seeing thunderstorms probably on Saturday compared to Sunday. But each day, I'd say we will see at least a shower or thunderstorm. The good news is it looks like the winds that help move the thunderstorms are going to turn more out of the westerly direction as we head through the weekend. And as a result, your best chances for precipitation might be in the morning through midday, and most of the activity might be off to the east of us during the mid to late afternoon hours. Now, for early risers and people who want to do stuff in the morning, that may not be good news, but those of you who want to do stuff in the afternoon and in the evening hours, at least that's sort of the trend that we might see happening over the weekend.
And you know what I'm looking right now, Dan, and I've actually taken the full screen image here, and I'm looking at the National Weather Service radar. There's a pretty significant outflow boundary, just like we had last night. If you look at this boundary, you see the winds right here, folks? Right in this area going over the bay and through western Hillsborough County. Now, that boundary seems to me, if it's going to, now the question is it going to run into anything and turn into a line of storms? Interestingly enough, the 4K RPM model was doing just that around 8 o'clock, and this boundary is pretty significant. I know you're not looking at radar right now, but it does seem to me like there's a chance we could see another area of some pretty nasty storms coming up in the next hour or two. And, you know, I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to go ahead and look at the RUC, look at the PSU website, the EWAL site, and because we use that a lot here. So again, what's your take? You know, the fact that we had those storms pop up last night, are those the same sort of storms that you would consider a possibility for tonight or for tomorrow night, or what's the timing of this?
Yeah, one thing I noticed on the radar, and I'm not sure if you're showing a long enough loop, but you notice there was a really good, nice boundary showing up on the radar. It was moving across Hillsborough County and into the bay. That boundary right now is roughly from just south of Brooksville all the way down to central Pasco County into western Hillsborough County. Those features, when they hit the coast, there tend to be winds converging through there. So it's conceivable either in the bay or along the coast. We could certainly see some evening development with those thunderstorms.
Okay, and actually, you know,
that boundary.
Interestingly enough, and I'm showing that right now. Actually, I'm showing the southeast. It's interesting because for whatever reason, I can go and manipulate some of these full screen graphics with you there, and it's not causing this thing to lock up. But yet, for whatever reason, what we were doing earlier was just locking it up like crazy. But yeah, so the boundary you're talking about is the one located, I see it, it's right in there. It actually extends from Citrus County through all the way down pretty much to Sarasota County, if you look at it.
Right, exactly. So I think that's the thing to watch. Like I said, we don't see stuff developing, but there are some thunderstorms down toward Fort Myers. And if there's any development, it's probably going to be related to that boundary getting to the coast and winds converging along through there. Then. So we really did not have a real good, strong east southwesterly wind today. Winds were like 6 to 12 knots along the coast through here. So, but sometimes these really subtle boundaries and interaction with a Gulf Coast like that, sometimes you get some really strange development, you know, between now and about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you know. So, well,
people who have their, I'm sorry, people who have their weekend, I'm showing some Ophelia stuff right now as well. People who have their weekend plans for Saturday and Sunday, what do you think in terms of the timing?
Well, I think again, I think thunderstorms are probably going to be more likely to occur during the weekend. On Saturday, I think they're going to be more likely to occur during the morning through the midday, early afternoon hours. Same thing on Sunday. Again, I think there'll be a lot more activity on Saturday as opposed to Sunday, just simply because the way the thunderstorms that are developing in the Gulf of Mexico. I kind of expect those to be a little bit more active on Friday, and I think it'll linger into Saturday as well with stuff developing through there. But as you and I discussed this earlier today, the weekend pattern certainly is a tough one right now. But if we take the idea that the winds are kind of going to be out of the westerly direction, as long as there's not these huge thunderstorms off the coast, we might see our best chance for rain during the morning and midday hours of both days of the weekend. Yeah,
and that makes sense. And there's some little rules that we often talk about. One of which, as simple as it is in the Bay Area, if you get a westerly wind in the summertime, you can almost always expect some sort of morning activity along the coast, and it pushes inland. And if you get an east or a southeast wind, you'll get what we're having right now, which is late day stuff. I'm showing the 6-hour RUC. If you look on the bottom right side here, people, the 12-hour precip ending from the latest RUC, and if you look at that line, that's a precip total of about 1 to 1.5 inches of rain north to south along that line, and it's all moving west, and yet your 1 hour time period right next to it is pretty limited. So certainly shows that the atmosphere's got a good bit of moisture, and Dan, you guys are anticipating that that's going to be even more so. Yeah, in fact, look at the energy out in the Gulf. I mean, there's a ton of moisture that's, I think, eventually going to be coming this way, yes?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is you look at that satellite, and you look at the radar out through there. There's a lot of activity that's developing. That's associated with a really unusually strong upstorm, which is coming from the Great Lakes southeastward. And when you have such a storm, it creates a feature which we call an upper level trough, and it bends the upper level winds into the Gulf of Mexico and causes our winds to become more southwesterly. Whenever you create a southwest wind in the Gulf of Mexico, sometimes that can create a large area of showers and thunderstorms. So we're starting to see that happening over the north central Gulf, and as you can see near the Panhandle right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm showing our viewers a loop like you mentioned about the all of the stuff that's popping from Naples to Fort Myers. It does look like it's going almost more northerly. I mean, granted, I mean, you were saying that 850 millibars still showing southeast, but right now these look like, and boy, you can see that boundary clear as day. If everybody watches this, look over Tampa. See this line right there? In fact, I'm going to zoom in on this because this is an awesome shot here of this boundary. And I know you can't see it, Dan, but what I'm showing here is I'm zooming in to this, this outflow boundary. Watch this line here and explain to everybody what an outflow boundary is.
Yeah, basically what an outflow boundary is when a thunderstorm develops, you feel that cool air coming out ahead of the thunderstorm just before the thunderstorm hits. And that's what it is. It's almost like a mini cool front. We had some thunderstorms off to the east of us earlier today, and that combined with the old West Coast sea breeze. There's always a sea breeze boundary this time of the year, and that kind of triggered the thunderstorms that across towards around the Lakeland and Arcadia area, and all that. And now that boundary is trying to work westward now. Mm-hmm. But again, if it continues to move toward the coast, we get those winds to come together at the coast. We could see some very quick developing thunderstorms within the next 2 to 3 hours. That's
exactly what we had last night. And one more thing, and then I'll let you run. Thank you so much for helping us out here. And I think now that we've got kind of the limitations down on what this system does and what it doesn't do, I think I can probably handle some of the graphics as well in terms of following what you're doing. But you mentioned something that I think is interesting, and there's a lot of people here on this site who are very interested in the dynamics of weather. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I'm about to show the 12Z Euro. And I had mentioned to you earlier that I looked at a lot of the surface stuff and the GFS as well. But explain to them what you were telling me about how the surface features on a long-range map sometime are less important than what we call the 850 or the 500 millibar features, and explain what those are, because I think that's very helpful for them when they're trying to do some of the forecasting on their own.
Right. What we as forecasters look at, I don't look at the surface when I look at the long range that often, because the surface becomes so muddled because of frictional forces affecting the air currents, you know, within a storm system or within the actual general weather. When you look just above the surface at 850 millibars, about 5,000 feet, you start to find features. And so when we're looking in the tropics, we actually look at that level to see whether there's a defined feature. And if you look at that level, you'll really shows up much better. Now, it actually might skew what might be a weak system. So you have to sort of separate those things out. For example, if you look at the current system we're dealing with right now with Ophelia, and you look at the surface versus the 850 millibar vorticity, let's say, or the twisting motion in the atmosphere, you see a lot more feature right through there, and you can follow that feature, even if you have all kinds of noise in the model.
And Dan, just a second, let me explain real quick. What people are looking at right now, and we're losing audio again some, but the bottom right on your screen is 850, the bottom left on your screen is 700, and the top left is 500. So again, 850, as Dan said, is about 5,000 feet up, and then you go to 700, and that's up higher, and then you go more than that, and it's up even higher at 500 millibars. So different layers of the atmosphere have different impacts on what's going on. And again, that's what's very important. Dan's talking about the surface, which is obviously, you know, the surface, it might be 1,000 millibars, whatever the pressure is right there. You know, that doesn't necessarily, when you see a low there, that isn't necessarily what you're looking for. Again, the bottom right is 850, there's 700, there's 500. So I just wanted them to get an idea of what you're talking about with that. So keep going.
Yeah. So anyhow, so when you look at the European model, for example, did you call that up? Or
Yeah, that's what I've got up. I've got the Euro. What time frame do you want me to look at?
For example, let's take a look at the 96-hour time frame, which would be Sunday.
All right.
It'd be 12Z Sunday.
Got it up there.
And 8:50. And then what you'll see there is you'll see, again, do you have vorticity call up on your system?
Actually, I do, yeah.
Yeah, okay. You'll see a bullseye just northeast of Leeward Island. You see that?
Yeah. If you're looking, well, actually, what we're called up is the Penn State EWAL site, the 12Z Euro. So you could probably see it if you look at it.
If you can show my screen, I don't know if you can still show my screen or not.
Yeah, I can. Here, let's get rid of this.
Hold up right here.
There we go. Good.
Okay, see it?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the big the high pressure areas right here over the central Atlantic. That's the Azores Bermuda High. Here's your 850 feature, which is Ophelia. Now let's take this 2 time step to here. You can kind of see this would be for 12Z Monday, and this would be 12Z Tuesday. And so, and if you look closely at if you can see my cursor, there's Bermuda right there. So according to this is the 12Z around the European. It actually takes it to just southwest of Bermuda, 144 hours out. And as we go to the next time step, you can see it's almost squished because look at the westerly winds that flow across that area. So if you look at the loop there, just watch how that moves with time and kind of see how that really moves around the outer periphery of the high. And then once it gets into the westerlies to the northeast, it just rockets northeast.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that shows up more vividly than a surface low. The surface features don't show up nearly as well as the upper level features do.
And what you and I were talking about is the only thing that that could be a little tricky with this forecast is that weak, ragged features don't follow upper level and mid-level winds. They usually are more influenced by low-level winds. So if for whatever reason Ophelia did not crank up at all and got the dry air entrained and got the shearing winds to cause it to weaken, it potentially could go more to the west, although your modeling that you're looking at that you showed me earlier at the beginning of this just wasn't showing that, correct?
Now, the European, which was not showing much of a feature, now does show a well-developed feature. So, and all the computer models are pretty much in agreement, on really showing us a fairly strong system. I'm not suggesting a hurricane, but certainly a tropical storm. And as long as it stays a tropical storm, that means it's got a nice vertical extent. It extends several thousand feet deep, and that kind of feature is going to catch those winds. It's almost like a ship with a sail. It'll have a lot of wind to help move it along. And so that's the reason why this model is taken up toward Bermuda by Tuesday night, Wednesday, and out to sea or out to the northeast. We refer to these as fish storms because they don't affect anybody but just maybe fish.
And what are you showing in the northern Caribbean right there? I have the cursor circled as well.
Yeah, okay. There we go. If you show my image here again, you'll notice there's a feature right there in the western Caribbean, there near the Yucatan Peninsula, and you'll see that is definitely some kind of an organized or some kind of a feature through there. We'll take that out to 240 hours, which would be 10 days out. And again, there's still a feature there. Now, it may look kind of ragged to you, but to me, that's pretty impressive. That far out, it's hanging on to some kind of feature out there, 240 hours. Now, Dennis, I cheated, and there's enough out to a month. It's called the European Extended Model. It's actually part of what we call the European Ensemble Group, and the actual control run of the ensemble goes out to 30 days. And what it does, it takes it to where you see it right here, and then it just kind of turns it westward. But as I said before, once you get out to 10 days, you're at the very edge of what I'd call real hard science being performed by the computer model. Once you get beyond 10 days, a lot of times those computer models go all over the place. So I don't really trust too much beyond 10 days right now.
What's that little twist in the northern Gulf right there by Texas?
Yeah, there is definitely a feature there, but again, like I said, that could be noise. That actually sometimes we'll see thunderstorms show up in this model like that. So that actually could just be a thunderstorm area. When I look at the upper air pattern, I won't show that up right now, but the upper air pattern did not look favorable for something to be back in that area. at that point. But certainly, what you learn through time is you look at everything, and even though you may discount it, you keep it in the back of your mind saying, well, you know, this is certainly something I'm going to keep an eye on.
Well, again, Dan, thank you so much. You know, I've known Dan for years, and super guy, you know, but obviously the level of communication today compared to what we normally get on our webcasts, certainly a different level entirely. Can you figure out how to close? Remember how you were closing this down to get your face back up again?
Yeah.
People are gonna go watch Rays and everything else. But truthfully, thank you so much. And as we get into, you know, the possibility of the Euro or whatever showing something else, Dan has graciously already said that that he will come and spend some time with us again, because as we've been saying, I mean, we're getting hits from all over the place. You're seeing me twice, and that in itself is scary. Again, thank you very, very much. And let's see if he can get the video. There we go. He's gone. So now we should see him pop up, I think. You know, it's funny because it always makes me laugh because I hear this from people. It's like, Dennis, well, you're talking about all this scientific stuff, but how come you can't work? How come you can't figure out how to work this? You know, this ridiculous Skype thing or whatever. You know, so it makes me laugh. And apparently Dan has the same limitations that I do right now. So yeah. Dan, you're looking different than you did earlier. But I hear, just so you know, Shelley, I'm hearing, I'm getting posts here from Steve. You know, excellent show. Mike, thank you so much. Shelley, Matthew, Christy, Arlene, Kim, Joey, Randy. I mean, there's a ton of people who are coming in and out and have learned a lot. There he is. So, again, thanks, Dan, for everything. I know you've had a heck of a busy day, and I suspect the next few weeks will get even busier. But, again, thank you very, very much. And I will talk to you tomorrow, and we'll be talking to you soon, hopefully. Again, thank you so much for the information. Really appreciate it.
Okay, Dan.
Okay, talk to you later.
Okay.
So, everybody, that was Dan Kottlowski. Everybody giving a wonderful round of applause for Dan. And what I will do, folks, is I will do a couple. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to close out Skype. There goes Dan. And I'll tell you, I still have no idea if whether or not. Let's see if you can be able to see me on this. Yeah, I guess we're back. We're kind of back to where we're still using Skype. Which I guess if I were to, I can't close it out because if I did, the camera would not allow me to do it. So the one thing I wanted to show you guys, which I have not, and Dan didn't get around to it, was the 18Z GFS. And then we'll go, because I know you guys are going to want to start watching whatever primetime programming you will be watching. But we will look quickly at the 18Z GFS and see what it shows, because it's definitely been trying to spin some stuff up, as Dan said, and I am curious whether or not it does the same thing with the Caribbean. So there goes Ophelia. We look in the Western Caribbean. Not much yet. Still pretty quiet. Big low, big cutoff low up there. There's the stuff in the Western Texas cutting across, and then there's, now see, who knows? That what was in the Northern Caribbean, they're now bringing across the Yucatan. So at that point, really not a big deal. It doesn't look like that's anything significant to worry about right now. So I will pop Skype back up. I don't even know if you can see me anymore. I don't think you can. So so because my Procaster isn't working, we will just end it on this. Hold on, I got an idea. Let's go to this will blow. See if this blows your mind, or if it makes it here. All right, here we go. So we will see me. Oh, we can't even see me that way either, can we? That would work. So anyway, you guys, you can see commercial now. I've seen enough commercials. So anyway, you guys have a good night. If anything breaks later on, as always, you will be able to see it on abcactionnews.com. There you go, with Deborah LaFave on the front, the weather chat going on right there, and I will break in just as we did last night, and I have a feeling things will probably be popping in just a few minutes. But okay, the game's just warming up. I actually was wondering if anything had happened on the game yet. Yeah, that was a terrible loss. I was in a bad mood for the entire newscast. Terrible, terrible loss with that game. The Yankees pitched 6 guys that no one had ever even heard of, and we still couldn't beat them. Balled up, but the advantage is that Baltimore is winning 1-0. So there you go. There is something to, well, they are, but unfortunately Boston has first and third and nobody out, so I don't want to look at that anymore. So, and I won't. So there's our screensaver. So you guys have a good night, and thanks for coming as always, and we'll hook up with you guys later if things pop as I think they will. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.